I have a love-hate relationship with the Corsair 460X RGB, the RGB meaning that it ships with 3 RGB capable fans, as well as an integrated RGB controller. All of that is up top here, we'll go through that in a second. But my opinions of this case really haven't changed much since my initial review of the Corsair 400C, which you can check out in the card right here. It's a fairly old video, but most of what I said still stands. And I say that because the two cases and their dimensions are nearly identical. I don't think there's really anything that they change that was significant between the two. I do wish I still had the 400C so we could just do a side-by-side comparison, but pretty much anything that I praised in that video still applies here. And there are also a few other things, obviously. The tempered glass side panel as well as the front panel now make this case, have a bit more sex appeal than the original 400C had. Although the 400C's, opening window, kind of like a door, was a pretty cool feature. But I'd much rather trade that out for tempered glass. That's the in thing right now. And if I had to compare this to other cases of built-in, I would say this is probably third in my order of favorite mid-tower cases in terms of looks. The first being the NZXT S340 Elite, the second being the Phanteks P400 Tempered Glass Edition, and the third being the 460X. So let's talk first about the positives, and there are a number of them. It's the reason why I chose the Corsair 460X for my first ever AMD Ryzen PC build. And I left everything in here to show you what the finished product would look like. That's a big thing I was always concerned about when I was first looking at PC cases. What is it all going to look like when it's all said and done? And despite the, I would say kind of clashing color schemes here with the red and white, black pretty much complements everything. It's the only color you can get this case in currently, but you're not going to have a problem with, if you go with a purple and green theme, black's still going to look okay in that. And that's why a lot of case manufacturers choose black first off, and then if they have enough demand, they move on to the white side as well. The first thing you'll notice is plenty of support up in the front here. There's a good bit of space between the shroud, which is completely removable. It comes in 2 pieces. It's a bit of a pain to disassemble and reassemble, but it does come out. It's exactly the same as what I was talking about with the 400C in that older video. But you have space up here for a 120, 140, 240, 280, or even 360 millimeter AIO with room to spare down below and above. You know how you always have these little things on the bottom and top here where the fluid moves around the radiator that kind of extend that height a bit. But you have full-on compatibility for 360 mil in the front here, and you can just mount those to the 3 integrated fans. In this case here, they're RGB. You can also work up top. There isn't as much space up top, but you do have kind of a frontward juxtaposed mounting system. So if you wanted, you could just put a couple fans up here, or you could actually put something like a 240 up top, but you'll be covering up your motherboard a bit just because there isn't much of a clearance between the top of the motherboard and the top of the tower. Now just behind the radiator, you'll find 3 large rubber grommets, good for cable managing. Always good to see in a mid-tower case. It can be a bit difficult to get those cables routed properly and efficiently in a mid-sized tower, but there's a whole other story to this case behind the scenes, literally on the back side, and you'll see that soon. But from the front, I mean, if you really take your time, you can make this look clean. You also get a cutout in the basement down below to route your graphics card, 8-pin or 6-pin, whatever you got going on down there. It is a bit off-centered unless you have a very short graphics card, maybe something like an R9 Fury Nano or a short 750 Ti, something like that. Then your cable's going to have to kind of stretch over. You could also route it through the grommets in the back here. Just depends on what you think looks good in your build. You also have a few cutouts down below, one large one, good for primarily the HD audio cable. That's really about it. I was kind of disappointed that I had to route the front I/O connectors through one of the large rubber grommets. I would like to have seen another cutout down below strictly for the front I/O connectors. Now if you want to be really weird and quirky, you could actually fit some server motherboards, eATX, in here. You might be covering up the rubber grommets here to the right, but I don't know, it'd be kind of weird to put a server board in a case like this. Most of the time you're not wanting to just show those off through a tempered glass panel, but you can do that. That's the perk of having a very flat interior here. You don't have any grooves impeding motherboard extensions if they are required. There are 7 PCI slots at the back of the case, and then just above that you have a single 120 millimeter fan mount with some room to spare. You can slide that fan vertically up and down just according to how you want to configure things. You could also just barely fit a 120 rad up here. So if you have a water-cooled card, you know, AIO style, then you can make that work here. But you'd be cutting it very close. Don't buy any rad that's super bulky because it will not fit. It's just too narrow. One other tasteful feature Corsair's included in their 460X is this arrangement of cutouts here, good for any screwdriver. You know, when you want to get to these PCI slots here at the back, sometimes it's a little difficult to angle it this way. Sometimes they have them cut out in the back, but that extends the length of the case. So what they've done is included the screws on the inside, but they've made it easier to access those screws if you want to remove some covers and insert, you know, a Wi-Fi card or just your graphics card, something like that. You can just slide your screwdriver through these cutouts here and access those screws directly, which is just a cool extra feature that I think is it's nice that they didn't overlook, because that's a pain in a lot of other cases that I built in. Now, something else I did want to show you, the front of the 460X, you don't only get a tempered glass panel on the left side, but you also get one in the front, and that's good for either variant of the 460X that you get, the RGB edition or just I think they have a red version, so the fans are only set to a red LED color. This panel is also removable, by the way, but because you have a tempered glass panel, you can see straight through the thing, and it does look very cool. Check out those accents. And if you're worried at all about dust and, you know, how the 460X handles that, you can see our panel's already starting to come off here. These screws are very long, by the way. They go through the front panel and into the chassis main compartment. But Corsair's done a great thing with the dust prevention here. They have this panel that it's literally a dedicated panel in the board, and it slides off very easily. It just clips on and clips off. Not to be weird or anything, but this is probably one of the smoothest, just best feeling dust filters I've ever seen. It's very fine, it's magnetic, and it's just very well built. It's good to see that some of the finer details were very closely paid attention to. And down below we have our lighting control unit. On the far right here you'll have the animation button. You can cycle through fading in and out, blinking, you can have the colors fade between one another. In the middle here is your rate button, control how fast at which that animation occurs. And then the far left is your, I believe this is just the brightness control. You can turn things on and off with the far left. But you can just play around with all three. You'll get used to it. Very simple to do. And if you're like me, you just set it to one color and you just kind of leave it there. Right here you've got a reset switch. Good to see a dedicated one of those. Hard drive LED, headphone jack, microphone jack, and then two USB 2.0 ports. And then this power button here. Probably one of the smoothest feeling power buttons. You know, some of them are like really clicky and really loud. Some of them feel very mechanical. This is the sweet spot, folks, right here. Oh yeah. Now, here is where things get dicey. This is the one major pain about the 460X that keeps me from deeming it the best mid-tower case on the market. If they had this figured out, and I think I have a simple solution to this, but it's a little too late for it now. If they had figured this out, this would be one of the best cases, period. But it only ranks third, and you can kind of see why. It's a mess back here. And let me tell you, I put a lot of thought into cable management. You guys have seen, more than likely, this video right here. Cable management is a passion of mine. I like to open up the backside of my case and see everything nice and neatly organized. But that's impossible here. It is straight up impossible. The Corsair 460X is one of the worst cases when it comes to cable management, period. And there's a simple reason for why that's the case, using the other definition of case in that sense. Corsair did not make the 460X wide enough, and it was the exact same issue that plagued the 400C. So they made barely enough room for a 120 in the front, and then of course once you get past the motherboard tray, all you've got left is about, I would say, that's around ½ an inch. And that's not enough. You want about 3/4 of an inch to an inch of leadway between the motherboard tray and the right side panel in order to have a nice and pleasant cable management experience. You do not get that here. On top of that, you've got a lot of things that are popping out. Look, the distance between the SSD trays and the rear panel is literally negligible. There's like no space at all between this and the panel. So, you know, with how easy Corsair's made it to you know, insert SSDs and even to remove hard drive trays, things like that, you really don't have any room to store cables. And if you're not using anything other than a fully modular power supply with custom sleeved and custom length cables,
gonna have a bad time.
You'll have a lot of bulge here at the bottom. More than likely, I have about probably ½ an inch of bulge here at the bottom, and it's pretty much good up top, but that's because there's nothing up top. So yeah, this is something that it plagued the 400C. It's still plaguing the 460X. If cable management is a huge concern of yours, you have a ton of cables, a ton of peripherals to put into your case, then I recommend stepping up to the 570X, which is kind of like the 460X's old brother. It's a bigger case, bigger chassis. It's also longer, so you'll have a lot of room for other things. But this is about as compact as you can get with a mid-tower case without just plain up not being able to insert your power supply and make the cables fit in the back. I mean, just look at how little space I had between the edge of my power supply and the front of my hard drive tray. So if you want to include a hard drive in the 460X or the 400C for that matter, you better not choose a power supply any longer than this one right here. I know I'm kind of playing the role of Captain Hindsight here. Granted, I knew this was going to happen because I already experienced this with the 400C, so it seems like I'm being a bit rough on the case, but I have to be completely honest with all of you, because if you buy this case and figure out that it's going to be a pain to build in, you're going to come back at me and say, why didn't you say that? So I've got to say it, because I've felt the same way about it. It's nothing that I can really hide at this point. The building process is a major pain. Now, it will pay off in the end in the sense that everything's going to look super slick and super compact, the way it should in a mid-size case, but it's going to be rough, it's going to be tough, and it's going to require some skill to get those cables in just the correct places to make that back panel slide on the way it needs to. And even then, it still probably won't slide on the way it needs to. In the looks department, I think it's a 10 out of 10. I think they nailed it here. I'm glad they didn't really change much of the aesthetic design from the 400C because it was already a good looking case. In the price department, I think it's very competitively priced, no complaints here. It's actually very similar to its other tempered glass counterparts. But in the building experience department, which a lot of people heavily weigh when considering a new case, it's like a 6 out of 10, and that's a conservative estimate. It all really comes down to whether or not you have the patience. And mine was wearing very, very thin. I have the 460X linked in the video description. Check it out if you haven't already. Let me know if you have this case and what your thoughts are, or if you're considering this or one of its close competitors. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you thought it was cool. Thumbs down for the opposite. Click the subscribe button if you haven't already. I will catch you in the next video. This is Salazar Studio. Thanks for learning with us.